Welcome to the Action Drug Rehab Hour. I'm Cary Quashen. I am your host. And hey, happy Monday, everybody. I hope you all are staying hydrated and out of that heat. It's crazy out there right now. It's just hot. But anyways, it's good to be here. We have a special show today. First of all, Robbie, everybody knows Robbie Robinson. Robbie Robinson, he co-hosts the show with me occasionally. And I love when he's here. He's just a great guy. Bill, Robbie, you know, what a great guy. He works at the sheriff's department. He's an old gang probation officer, and his job is to go out there and help people in Santa Clarita that wants to get sober. So if they're in jail and it's because of alcohol or drugs, Robbie meets them.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, Robbie, thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Robbie, we're lucky today. We got Bill Bodner here. You know who Bill Bodner is?
Well, why don't you explain who he is?
Bill Bodner is the special agent in charge of the Los Angeles D.E.A, Drug Enforcement Agency. And I had the pleasure of going through the DEA Citizens Academy. And boy, I learned a lot. I thought I knew a lot, but I learned even more.
Right.
So I really, you could see what they are now doing to try to curb what's going on in this country. And I was talking to Bill right before the show. I've been doing this stuff for 40 years. In the last 10 years, I've been screaming about the opioid epidemic. And remember right before the pandemic,
yeah.
Every time we turned on the TV, it was talking about opiate epidemic,
yep.
Opiate overdoses, and doctors are writing too many prescriptions. And then bang, the pandemic came.
Yep.
And everybody stopped talking about opiates. But at the same time as the pandemic, the medical association realized, hey, we're causing a lot of people to be addicted to drugs.
Yeah.
They literally stopped writing prescriptions,
Yeah.
which opened the door to a whole lot of stuff. And if you think about it, when the pandemic came, people who were depressed, they got more depressed. People who drank, they drank more.
Yep.
People who used drugs, used more drugs, but guess what? The supply was cut. Demand was higher than ever in history, and all of a sudden there's no supply. China said, whoa, opportunity.
Yeah. Isolation, too, is a big part of what drove that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it got completely off the hook. And some of the stuff that I want to do today, first I'm going to let Bill introduce himself and tell you who he is and how long he's been doing that, and what a great guy.
Sure. Bill Bodner, Special Agent in Charge, Drug Enforcement Administration, Los Angeles. I've been a DEA agent for 31 plus years now. Seen a lot of changes on the streets and in the illicit drug market. Like you said, man, fentanyl has been the game changer. There's such a sense of urgency with addressing it, more so than any other drug I've seen. And you talked about, where this all started. In 2012, believe it or not, and this is Centers for Disease
Right.
Control numbers, 255 million opiate prescriptions were written in this country. And I don't know what the adult population of the United States was back then. The adult population, probably 300 million.
I was going to say, we're almost close to writing a prescription for everybody.
That's it. And what happened is, you hit the nail on the head. As the medical providers caught up to the problem and recognized what was happening, and people like you recognized what was happening, and law enforcement recognized it, we were able to get that number dialed back, but it created a void. And where did people go? They turned to the drug cartels, and they saw the opportunity to make a buck, and they stepped in and started marketing.
It was a perfect storm, wasn't
absolutely.
it?
Absolutely.
It was a perfect storm. So
Yeah.
the cartels, tell us more.
So the cartels thought, hey, there's a huge demand for these pills in the United States. They're not as available as they used to be. Let's make these pills in illicit drug labs in Mexico, and we'll flood the streets with them. We can make them for 13 cents a piece, and back then they could sell them on the streets for $20.
That's right.
It's a lot cheaper today, but you can see the amount of money they can make. And at that time, Cary, and you know this, everybody thought those were real oxycodone pills. The blue M30 pills, everybody back then thought they were real. And, a lot of people were harmed by that.
Yeah, I actually watched it happen, and so did you. I mean, it was so easy to see it coming when it finally hit, because it went crazy, especially in the rehab business. Everybody that was coming to rehab We were testing them, and they were testing for fentanyl, but nobody used fentanyl.
Right.
They were coming for heroin, they were coming for opiates, they were coming for M30s, they were coming for Vicodin, whatever it was. The pills were not real.
Yep.
And we kept telling people. And what made it really interesting for us is when you detox people. Like if somebody needs to get detox, I can bring them in there on opiates, get them some Suboxone and some medication, and they're fine.
Right.
Fentanyl works way different. You can't give them detox medication for 48 hours.
Wow.
If you do, you put them in immediate withdrawals. And they're a whole lot sicker than anything else that you can even imagine. So at first we were bringing all the opiate addicts in, and we were giving them medicine to detox them, and they were getting sicker.
Wow.
So you have to wait 48 hours or sometimes longer before you can actually give them the medication. But people were coming in, Bill, they were using the pills, and they were all fentanyl back then.
Yeah.
It just exploded.
Yeah.
At the same time as the pandemic. Then I'm going to tell just a quick story, and you could jump in this. When I was going through Facebook, and I saw a friend of mine post, Jaime.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. I was looking at my Facebook, and I see Jaime Porter, a good friend of mine, post about his son overdosing on a half a fentanyl pill.
Yep.
And from there, it just went crazy.
And that story is, unfortunately, it's not uncommon. It's a teenager buying a pill off social media that they think is a legitimate prescription drug. A lot of time it's Xanax, and they're taking it because they're self-medicating. Right. You know, they have some stress of being a teenager. You know, whatever it is, they're making the decision to self-medicate. They're taking that pill. They don't know that it's fentanyl. They're being deceived, and it's causing tremendous harm to our teenage population.
It's kind of like murder, isn't it? That's
how
I look at it.
That's how we actually investigate it, as if it is a manslaughter or a murder charge.
Well, it is, though.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if it's what's really different. Let's say you go to the store and you buy aspirin and there's poison in it.
Right.
Let's say a kid wants to buy a Xanax, and they give him fentanyl.
Right.
And it kills them. Isn't that the same thing?
Hey, you guys tell me, imagine if it were a cancer drug that was being counterfeited and it was killing our teenagers. What would the response be? And my thing is, let's have the same response that we would have for that.
Absolutely. So, well, let's say you turn on your television today. And tell me if you can think of any. Okay, turn on your television. And they say over 100,000 people are going to die from gunshots this year. Well, we'd start screaming, wouldn't we?
Oh, yeah.
Why aren't we screaming now? You know how many people lost their lives to accidental drug overdoses last year? Accidental. Let's put some numbers out there. Over 100,000 people confirmed that we know about, right?
Yep.
What about the unconfirmed? Want to double that number?
Yep.
How about people that took their lives because of suicide? You want to quadruple that number now? How about domestic violence? How about child molestation? How about car crashes, armed robberies? What do you think the real pandemic is right now?
Drug-caused death. That's what it is. I mean, I think the total number of people killed in gun violence in this country last year, I want to say it was in the ballpark of 40,000, 40 to 50,000. A lot of talk about it, a lot of pending legislation about different things. We need the same response for this type of drug, for fentanyl, because it's not. There's no second chances with fentanyl. That's the issue.
You don't hear about it, I know a lot of the people that lost their lives, even a lot of the celebrities, but you don't really hear about it unless it's a celebrity.
Yep.
And then you hear about it. I open my Facebook, guys, every day, and I'm telling you, 3 to 5 times a week, I see on my Facebook somebody's died that I knew.
Right.
Somebody comes into rehab, they leave. We tell them, don't use, they use, they die. We go to funerals.
Right.
You know, and the sad thing about rehabs, let me just for a second, for people that are going to rehabs, listen to this. Most everybody that goes to rehab, they don't want to be clean. They're not coming to rehab to be clean. They're coming to rehab to stop using fentanyl, or stop using cocaine, or stop drinking tequila. But in their mind, they think, well, if I drink tequila, why can't I smoke weed? If I'm using fentanyl, why can't I drink? If I'm drinking, why can't I pop pills? So that's the thinking that's going to get every one of you back into rehab or kill you if you have an addictive personality, it's real simple, and you want to get clean, stop using and drinking. Period. Nothing.
You know, Cary, on Saturday night, I ran into a gentleman who has 32 years sober. And I looked at him and I said, hey, and he's 60, 61 years old. I looked at him and I said, hey, today, what would happen today? He said, oh, I'd be dead. He said, I'd be dead. And that's the way it is.
Bill, I got 42 years clean and
Yeah.
sober. I'll have 43 on Christmas Eve. Don't even ask. But if I use, I'll be dead. I know that.
Right.
That's why. I mean, I'll never forget where I came from.
Yeah.
And just to piggyback on what you said, the kids are getting cheated today. First of all, if you experiment with drugs today, you're playing Russian roulette. If you're recreationally using any drug today, you're playing Russian roulette. Because everything out there has something in it today. Are people dying from shooting fentanyl? Of course. Are they dying from buying fentanyl oxys? Of course. But what about methamphetamine?
Right. Cocaine, too. Yeah. I mean, we've seen, hey, I think it's, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Cary, I think it's always been somewhat easy for us, 15, let's say 20 years ago, for us to identify who was at risk of a drug-caused death.
Oh, yeah.
We could look for signs of substance use disorder,
Right.
and we could say, hey, that person's at risk of dying of, because of drugs. We have to give them help. Nowadays, the equation's a little different because we have experimental drug users.
Right.
Kids that some of them have never used a drug.
First time
First
users.
time. They're going to take what they think is a safe prescription pill. Devastating consequences. Then to cocaine, we have the 30-somethings, maybe 40-somethings. Hey, in their mind, they don't have a drug problem. They just like to party once a month. They're going to use cocaine at a club. They don't know that the dealer has mixed fentanyl with that cocaine to create a speedball, which is a drug cocktail older than all three of us. Or what happens sometimes is fentanyl is mistaken for cocaine. A dealer will switch it by accident.
Right.
And it has devastating consequences. That's when you see 3 or 4 people, 5 people overdosing or dying at one location.
Mass overdoses
They usually
at one
they
time.
usually all thought it was cocaine, and it turned out to be fentanyl, and it kills them.
What about those comedians that use cocaine and died?
There's a great example of it.
John
Right?
Belushi, you talk about.
He had a speedball.
Yeah,
John Belushi
John
died of a
Belushi,
speedball.
as I was talking with somebody today, a lot, not all, but a lot of the motion picture business, a lot of people are still using lots of drugs. My first, when I met Carey, before I really met him and really got to working with him, I was at the station. I was a gang probation officer, and then I started my new position as an intervention specialist, civilian investigator. And I saw a guy under the influence of fentanyl. It was the first time. I saw 2 instances. The first time I was at the station, the guy stood up, stood by the door, got by the door, and started growling. And I was looking at him, and I was like to his dad, "What's going on?" He said, "Oh, he's coming down from fentanyl." The second time I saw someone under the influence of fentanyl, they gave him Narcan. I had found out, learning from Carey, the guy he had taken it, and it was a little while, so they went to the hotel, the sheriffs, they gave it to him. I saw him jump up and run out the door, just like out of a Dracula movie.
Well, here's what happens with Narcan. Somebody uses a pill. It's laced with fentanyl. All they know is they copped, they took a pill, they got high, they miss everything else.
That's right.
All the ugliness. Oh my God, somebody's doing CPR, the ambulance is coming, the police are there, they're Narcanning them. All they know is they took a pill and bang, they're in instant withdrawal when they wake up.
Yeah.
So one of the guys punched an ambulance.
They won't be happy.
No. They
They
miss the ugliness.
Yes, that's a great point. And hey, here's something that we've seen, Cary. We've seen people get revived by Narcan, very upset, just like Robbie talked about, like you talked about. They will go out and use again, and guess what?
Yep.
So here's the thing. The Narcan's still in their system, so the fentanyl's not going to have an effect on them. So guess what they do? They use more.
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden the Narcan wears off, and boom, they get like a delayed action, delayed onset overdose, and no one's there to help them then, and they die.
I have had a patient come in once. I'm not going to mention his name, obviously, but he came in because he overdosed on Xanax that were tainted, obviously, with fentanyl. So they brought him to the hospital. They did all that stuff, He left the hospital, went home, and guess what he did?
Used again?
The same bottle of pills.
Yeah.
And then they had to Narcan him again. So I've known people that's been Narcan 2 and 3 times a day.
Yeah.
And I haven't admitted anyone in my rehab in the last, I would say, almost year that's an opioid user that doesn't know multiple people, friends of theirs that died,
Wow.
or has not been Narcan themselves more than once.
Wow.
This is a little different story, similar, but it's a very
Why aren't we
effective.
screaming?
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
It's-
you are.
it's-
I am.
yeah.
He is.
This story is effective. When I was a gang officer, I remember we going into a house and a guy jumped out of a window from a high point. Jumped out of it was PCP.
That's PCV.
Yeah, that's
He jumped out of a window, and my party was 3 of us. We went to get him on a warrant or whatever. He jumped out of a window. We ran down the steps, and the officers I was with said, "You don't have to worry. He jumped out. He's on that stuff. We'll catch him." No, they were right. 2 weeks later, I seen him limping up the street, and he had the nerve to try to run. And we just said in the car, "Do you want us to take you to the hospital?" It was about he tried to run for a mile. And we just looked at him and said, do you need help? And we took him to the hospital. So what happens is these drugs are like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They're like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I've seen people just working with Cary. He and I were working with a woman. We were trying to get into the movie business, doing some stuff to help. She didn't want that. She got up and walked away. And I said to Cary, he said, "We just have to try to help
She
her."
was a nurse. She
was a
rehab
nurse.
before she found fentanyl.
Yep.
And that just now she's living on the side of the freeway. I know where the tent is. They
Yeah.
took her from the tent
Yeah.
twice.
Yep.
You know what I've heard, Carey, and I'd like to hear
Yeah.
your experience in rehab on this. I've heard that, hey, substance use disorder obviously horrible for everyone, but I've heard people say on heroin they could function.
Mm-hmm.
When they transitioned to fentanyl, whether it was because it was all that was available or whatever, all of a sudden they couldn't function anymore.
50 to 100 times stronger.
Yeah,
Yes.
and they would have to use almost every hour, and they couldn't
Yes.
hold a job anymore, and they just couldn't do the things that they used to be able to do.
No.
So the quality of life went down even further.
And then you got more crime. And then
Yep.
you got more homelessness.
Yep.
And you put it together. Why are we in such a crisis? Well, it's pretty simple to figure out. They called me from Channel 9 News Friday, and they wanted to know if I could do an interview. I couldn't because I'm not a lab. But they were finding traces of fentanyl in the subways on the stairs.
Oh, yeah.
High amounts of it.
Yeah.
And they wanted to know the numbers. I gave them a phone number of a lab, but they were finding traces of fentanyl on the stairs in the subway. But it's so, but to answer your question, I guess where I'm going with it, it's just so strong
Yeah.
Yes.
that once you are addicted to fentanyl, everything changes.
Sure does.
First of all, the fear of detox is one of the most frightening things to anybody using it, because they know that they're going to have to go through 2 to 3 days of the worst agony pain ever in history.
Wow.
I mean, think of the flu and times it by 100.
That's what the guy told. It's
Their-
funny
their-
you said that.
Their
The
hair
guy
hurts, their
told-
skin hurts, their
The
bone
guy
hurts.
told me.
They throw up, they have diarrhea, they cold sweats, their bones hurt. They feel like they're jumping out of their skin.
That's
And
what
you
he told
can't
me.
really give them much for the first couple of days. And again, to answer what you took, just to piggyback on what
Yeah.
you said, heroin's strong.
Yes, it is.
I mean, we know that.
Yeah.
Now times it by 50 or 100
know,
times.
I know.
That's fentanyl. No, they can't function.
Right.
They can't function, and they have to continue to get high, which means how are they going to get the money? That's where we get all this crime and homelessness and craziness.
Yeah, the social issues. I mean, I've been saying that for, I don't know, a number of years now, just like you, with synthetic drugs, methamphetamine and fentanyl. They're driving a lot of the social issues that we're seeing, whether it's homelessness or the mental health crisis that we see on the streets. If you're walking around naked in downtown LA,
Yeah.
you're not mentally healthy. You need help. And a lot of that is driven by drugs.
That's true.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And it's like we were talking about earlier. I mean, nobody decides to grow up. Let's do this for a second. Nobody decides to grow up and be an addict. When we're young, we all have what you call contracts. When I grow up, I want to be a probation officer. When I grow up, I want to be the head of the DEA. I want to be a radio host, or whatever the deal is. And they change. We also have another set of contracts when we're young. Remember these, and we're going to go on break, but we're going to talk about these when we come back from break. When I grow up, I will never. Remember those? The contracts are the things we said we would never do. I'm never going to use drugs. I'm not going to smoke cigarettes. I watched my dad die from it. You know, I'm not going to steal. Those kind of contracts. Somewhere down the line, those contracts change. And you want us to take a break, and then we'll come back and do about the contracts? You want to do one more minute first? So let me just ask a question. What's the gateway drug?
Hey, I can tell you what it's become now, what people think it is. And that's a real good point, because what people think the gateway drug is now is prescription drugs. They think they're safe.
Right.
Hey, Xanax is safe. I know friends that take it. I know this is a child's point of view. Or my parents take it. It's in the house. It's in a prescription bottle. It comes from doctors. The problem is when that gets twisted and it's not really Xanax, and you have no idea what you're taking. That's the danger. But prescription drugs have become the gateway drug. And hey, I'm going to say it, THC as well. That's a big one that still causes a lot of problems.
Yeah. So the gateway drug is you're 100% right now. It's turned into pills.
Right.
But in general, almost every addict that I've ever known started with nicotine, or alcohol, or prescription pills. It's anything, is what I'm saying.
Right.
So little Johnny's going to school, and little Johnny looks at the crowd of people over there, and they're smoking cigarettes, and they look super cool, and it looks exciting and glamorous. So little Johnny decides, I'm going to go over there and hang out. And he starts talking to everybody, and somebody says, hey, you want to hit a cigarette or vape now? And little Johnny says, no, I don't want to do that, because we know, it says it on the box, it kills you. But he's there every day, and he's starting to get desensitized. And little Johnny is part of this group, so he says, oh, what the heck, and he takes his first hit. What did he do?
Yep.
Broke a contract he made when he was probably in kindergarten. They're teaching people that. There's only two reasons a child would smoke a cigarette, guys. One, peer pressure. We know that. Two, it's a learned behavior from home. Mom, dad, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, somebody from home is doing that. Do what I say, not what I do. Doesn't work. And this is straight to parents now. Please be the person you want your kid to grow up and be. Be the person you want your kid to turn out to be. Not the person that says, don't do what I do. On that note, we're going to take a break. We'll come back. I want to talk about the contracts, and then you got a lot more I want to hear.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Action Drug Rehab Hour. I'm Cary Quashen. I am your host. I got a co-host with me. That's Robbie Robinson. And today's a special show. If you just came in, I got Bill Bodner, special agent in charge of the Los Angeles D.E.A. And it sure is great having you here.
Appreciate that.
When we went on break, we were talking about contracts, and I'll start it over real quick. When we're young, we have a set of contracts. Things we want to be and things we'll never do. And it's the things we never want to do. That's what I want to talk about for a second. Little Johnny, he knows. He's looking over there. Everybody's looking cool. He's seeing these great people, and they look glamorous and exciting. He starts hanging out with them, and they're smoking cigarettes or vapes, and somebody says, you want to hit? And he goes, no, I don't want to do that. He's there every day.
Yep.
It's starting to, he's getting desensitized. He might see it at home. He says, what the heck? And he takes his first hit. What did he do? He broke a contract he made when he was probably 10. So how does he clean that up? It's only nicotine. I'll never smoke pot. But dude, it's only pot. It's natural. God put it there, and it's legal. What's going on now in little Johnny's head? He's getting desensitized. It's only pot. What the heck? I'll try it. And he says to himself, well, it's only pot. I'll never use anything else. Contracts are getting weak. So what happens with little Johnny? He goes to a party. He starts smoking a little bit of weed. Maybe a little tequila comes in, and then all of a sudden a pipe comes along. And somebody says, try that. What is it? It's meth. Oh, no, never. But he drinks a little bit more, and he smokes a little bit more weed, and everybody's having fun. He don't see anything wrong, and he takes his first hit. If he has an addictive personality, he is now screwed.
Yes.
It's a shortcut to the pleasure zone of his brain. How do you tell anyone at 14 or 42 that something that makes them feel so good is bad? That's what we're fighting about. Now, little Johnny, let's talk about the peer pressure today, Bill. Yeah. Social media.
Yeah, the story you were talking about with little Johnny sees this group of people, right, and sees their behavior. Now, imagine if that behavior was coming to his smartphone 24 hours a day. Imagine if, even if he wasn't seeking out this content, imagine if friends of his sought that content out, or their friends sought that content out. Artificial intelligence, the famous algorithm, social media algorithms are going to push that content to him because innocently, maybe innocently, they say, hey, the other kids like to look at this, or these other users like this content, maybe he will.
That's right.
Especially this time of year with going back to school, when people's friend social groups change, be on the lookout for that.
Yeah.
And hey, if you're a parent and you don't know what your kid's doing on social media, there's a real danger. The way I always put it, Carey, is if you wanted to know who your kid was friends with 30 years ago, what'd you do? You looked out the window, and you could see who they're playing with, or who's knocking on the door to come and see if you're around to go out and play.
And you knew the neighbors.
And you knew the neighbors. But now, parents don't know who their kid is friending on social media. And the important question, why? Why are you making friends with that person right there? Who is that person to you?
That's right.
And what are they all about?
Right.
Those are pressures, man.
Check this out, little Johnny. We're going to stay with Johnny again.
Yeah.
So little Johnny's 14. What do you think the last thing little Johnny does before he goes to sleep? The very last thing he does, or little Jill.
Probably puts his phone down, right?
Well, yeah, that's exactly.
Right,
so
right.
little Johnny gets on his phone and he's talking to his friends in person, FaceTime. He sees them. He goes to sleep. What do you think the first thing little Johnny does when he wakes up in the morning?
Talks to his friends.
Checks his social media,
Talks to
talks
his
to his
social
friends, walks out. Maybe if he's lucky, mom or dad's home. Maybe not. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're divorced. Maybe they're both working.
Right.
Anyways, then he goes. So he goes to sleep with his friends. He wakes up with his friends. Then he goes to school with who?
His friends.
He's there 6 to 8 hours. Then he comes home. Mom and dad are maybe working. Maybe it's a single mom or dad. So who's waiting for little Johnny? People says nobody. That's so far from true.
Yep.
His friends either in person or in person. So let's see. He goes to sleep with his friends. He wakes up with his friends. He goes to school with his friends. He comes home to his friends. Then mom or dad comes home and says, hey, Johnny, how was your day? He says, it was cool. Well, what'd you do? I went to school. You have any homework? I done it. Are you hungry? I ate. The average parent, this is the most scariest thing out there, and I've been doing surveys for many years. The average parent of a teenager spends 2 to 10 minutes talking to their kid a day. Wow. Period. So these kids are with their friends 16 plus hours a day. You talk about peer pressure. In the old days when mom was home with milk and cookies, little Johnny made good choices. He didn't want to let her down. These kids are connected to social media and their friends, not their families.
That's right.
Yep.
So they're way more apt to do something to make their friends happy than their folks.
My mother used to say, constant association breeds simulation. You constantly associate with those type of people. Now, you don't have to be in their, quote, presence, but you can be in their sphere on social media.
Yep.
And I told some kids when I come to the class, I said, social media knows what you like once you start putting stuff on there.
Oh, yeah.
They know what you like. And then I said to them, I proved it to them. I look at boxing. Every day that I wake up, there's something on my social media about boxing. Every day. Now just think, if I was looking for drugs or something else, that would come up. So everything is accessible.
Go for it, Bill.
Everything is accessible.
And Robbie, take it one step further, right? So what you said is 100% true. What you look at, it's going to push that content to you. But don't forget that this artificial intelligence is smart. Now it's going to take what your friends look at, and it's going to send it to you.
That's right.
So even if you've made good decisions and you said, I'm not going to get into this, that's not for me, it's going to keep pushing that content to you because your friends are looking at it.
That's right.
And where do you think these kids are getting the pills?
Social media. Hey, it started during, I think you said it earlier, during COVID with isolation.
Right.
The places that people would normally go to get drugs, or even maybe that kids might exchange drugs, they were closed down. School was remote. Nightclubs were closed. Bars were closed. What happened? Drug dealers said, hey, I got to go to where the people are. And where is that? That was social media platforms.
Right.
they've stayed there because it's been so lucrative. So
That's
you,
right.
no matter where you live now,
Mm-hmm.
your neighborhood is an open air drug market because you can get on a smartphone, you can order drugs, get them delivered, and pay for them on a payment app.
That's right.
It's just like DoorDash or Uber
It's
Eats.
crazy.
Yep.
You know, actually, they were actually buying them, and DoorDash would bring them
Yep.
in bags
Yep.
to the house. So I mean, I don't. These kids, I mean, they come in, they show me.
Yeah,
They show me their Instagrams and Snapchats where people are selling drugs.
Yeah.
It's so crazy, Bill.
Yeah.
I mean, it's these kids really. I mean,
It's the drugs are so much more dangerous today than in our time, and it used to be like you could only get those real dangerous drugs in a specific part of town.
That's right.
And maybe you didn't know where it was, or if you did know, you were like, I'm going to make a decision that I'm not going to go there
That's right.
because it's sketchy or whatever.
That's right.
But that's not the case now. Now the
No.
drugs are 50 times more dangerous,
That's right.
and you can get them anywhere.
tell me for people listening out there. Tell me one drug that isn't physically addictive. Let's go through them real quick. THC. That high concentrated THC, I'm admitting patients to my drug rehabilitation center for addicted to that drug. That doesn't mean they're going to go through huge crying, screaming withdrawals, but they will go through withdrawals. They will have anxiety. They will have loss of sleep. They will have headaches. They will have sometimes even chronic throw up. How about Xanax? One of the most dangerous drugs there is to detox without medical care, and one of the most written prescriptions in the country. Ativan, Xanax, Valium. Okay, so what other drugs? Muscle relaxers, Soma. Let's pick that for a second. Great drug if you need a muscle relaxer for a short period of time. As soon as you use it, any extended period of time, your body needs it. So, are there a drug that's not physically addicted today?
I can't think of it.
These poor kids.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah. You know, the Center for Disease Control put something out along those lines, and it was it maybe came out 3 or so years ago. It said, and people had questions about this, and you just answered the question. The study said if you left a doctor's office with 10 days of an opiate drug, there was a 50% chance 1 year later you would be addicted to the drug. And people said, how is that possible? I'm going to be... Well, after about 10 days, you're probably going to have some level of physical addiction to the drug.
Right.
Which tricks your brain to believe you still need that pain med.
There you
That's
go.
right.
So what's going on is it's not even the pain that you think, it's the detox pain.
Right.
But your mind is being tricked by the opiate that it needs it. Now also think this through. We all have chemicals in our brains, right? And these chemicals make us feel good. When we start using drugs, they take over that chemical. So your brain now says you don't need to produce the dopamine. You don't need to produce all that because you're getting it from an outside source.
Right.
So now when people stop using, the brain's not even giving you that anymore. So of course they go through serious depression and loneliness.
There's a void.
Is a void.
Right. I get it. The body's not producing it. That makes a lot of sense.
Because the drug has been,
Yep.
if you're getting it artificially, your brain says, well, we don't want to overload the brain with this stuff.
Wow.
So it stops producing it. So that's just another part of why people use addiction. See, when you're treating people, we don't have to teach people how not to use drugs. Don't use. Simple. We now have to teach people how to deal with feelings.
Right.
Because when they start feeling depressed, and don't forget the dopamine and all that serotonin stuff isn't being produced, and a feeling of loneliness comes over, they don't know how to cope with that feeling, so the obsession to get high comes. And the brain says, go get something to make us feel better now. And once that little switch is clicked, they're gone.
Right.
And the scariest part, Bill, is today, and I tell everyone leaving rehab, people that are dying have been sober for a while.
Yeah.
Because what happens is you don't need that much anymore. But here's what your brain says you do.
That's a key piece, I think, because I have heard that when people get out of rehab, they've detoxed. Their attenuation, or their tolerance to drug goes way back down.
But their brain don't know it.
But their brain doesn't know it, so they use an amount that's too much for them right away.
Their brain says, give me more, and their body says, goodbye.
Wow.
That's what happens. So I don't believe in teaching harm reduction, but I'm doing some of that now.
Yeah.
Number one is, if you use, don't use alone. If you use and you got 3 people, make sure one doesn't use until the other ones are done. Because if you all overdose, how are you going to Narcan each other?
Right.
Now we got xylazine.
Yeah.
It's just.
Yeah.
Just
Hey, I'm with you. I'm a big believer in Narcan. I think that's saving.
Absolutely.
I think that's saving a lot of lives. We got to keep it out there and make sure people have it, because without it, we're in a lot worse shape.
I did a press conference about. Well, you were there, weren't you, at my press conference? No, it was Sheriff Villanueva and Mike Garcia, and I challenged all the schools to get Narcan.
Yep.
And they did.
Yeah, they did.
Yep.
But I was screaming about that because I saw it coming.
Yep.
Well, Narcan. I think every household should have Narcan. I think every business should have Narcan.
Yeah.
I know people that have found that their children have been died in restaurants, gas stations. I think it should be everywhere right now. I mean, it's going to save lives, and we need it everywhere.
Yeah. What is the machine with the chest paddles? AED.
That shocks you.
That shocks you. I mean, airplanes have them now. Mm-hmm. I wonder if commercial airlines have Narcan.
I believe they are. I believe they should. And one quick thing that I always say.
Can you believe in science? I'm sorry, Robbie.
That's all right.
But can you believe what we have to do now? I know 6-year-olds that are trained to give their brothers and sisters Narcan if they need to. Yeah. Look at how we're living today. Yeah. It's so sad. But then again, think about the deaths, 100,000 plus. Another who knows how many that we don't even know about. How about the it's just off the
and then here's the other thing, all the saves or all the people that overdosed and were revived. I mean, that's got to be 10x.
Oh my gosh.
At least 10x.
Oh,
so
minimum.
You're talking a million. You're talking a million people.
You can come to my rehab when you're done. Ask them. Every one of them been Narcan.
Wow.
Every one of them.
Yeah.
More than once. Every one of them lost friends and brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Every one of them. It's just,
You know what? And then the other thing about methamphetamine, fentanyl gets a lot of the attention, and rightly so, because it's killing people today. But what I tell people is the damage from methamphetamine is really just as great. It's just you're taking from these people for a number of years before they actually end up dying.
Yes.
They're losing family. They're losing any kind of financial security. Some of them are literally losing the clothes off their back and living on the streets. Psychosis. They're losing their minds.
They're losing their minds. I ran Henry Mayo's psych ward for 16 years.
Wow.
I've seen more crazy stuff than you could ever imagine because of methamphetamine. I've always said the worst drug ever to hit the streets is methamphetamine.
Oh, yeah.
The one that'll kill you the quickest is fentanyl. But methamphetamine is definitely the worst. You might as well put your mouth around a muffler and take a hit. That's what you're putting in that's just part of what you're putting in your body.
Yeah, I agree with that. That is 100% what I see. Worst drug, methamphetamine. Deadliest drug, fentanyl. Well said.
And now to take it even a step, this is really good. I'm bringing people in for meth and detoxing them off of fentanyl. Because the fentanyl's in the meth.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're putting 2 of the worst drugs together. So it's like, whoa, crazy out there. Bad time to use drugs or be a drug addict or even experiment or play or think you can see what it feels like. Yeah, it's a bad idea.
The drug cartels, they took Mother Nature out of the equation. What I mean by that is, it used to be heroin comes from the poppy plant. Mm-hmm. Cocaine, the stimulant that was big, when Robbie was working the streets, comes from the coca plant. Bad drugs, but now that the drug cartels have said, hey, we don't need to rely on a growing season. We don't need to control territory where we grow these plants. We can just make this synthetic drug, get chemicals from China, make the drugs in a garage and put them out on the streets. The profit is limitless. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the big problems is that transition from organic-based drugs to synthetic drugs. They're just so much more powerful today than anything we knew.
And there's so much money.
Yes.
I mean, you guys at DEA did a great job of stopping the fentanyl from coming into this country, but it's going to Mexico. And I don't know, maybe when we come back from break, you can talk a little bit about that. Because I don't know that the Mexican government's doing anything about it. I believe we even know where the labs are. But anyways, it is what it is. It's not us. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Well, hello. I know that everybody has learned a lot from Bill, our friend here, and He's just a very enlightening person on what's going on out in the streets. Please listen for you parents and even some of you kids and just people in general. We're going to hand it back over to Bill and then my partner.
Who's Bill, for people who just joined us?
Well, Bill is from the DEA.
He is the special agent in charge of the Los Angeles division of the DEA.
And he's a very, I'm just enamored by what he was talking about, just listening and taking in, and also what you're talking about, Carey. So we're going to turn it back over to Carey, and then Bill will continue to expound on what he knows.
First, I want to thank you for coming, Bill, and for
Pleasure.
everything that the DEA has and continues to do. I know people don't hear a lot about it because you guys are after the big wigs.
Yep. Yeah, we a lot of times I'll talk to Cary to find out what's going on at that street level. Like, what are the people suffering actually using?
Right.
Because our goal is to really work at the wholesale level. Kind of we try to focus our resources on where the most harm is.
Right.
And that's two places. One, that's people bringing literally 1 million fake pills at a time into our country and distributing them throughout the United States.
And you guys are getting those.
Oh,
pills.
we're getting them.
I know
we're
you
getting
are.
some of them.
Yes, you are.
That's a big part of it because, hey, when you think about 60% of those pills being potentially deadly, that's harm reduction. That's the law enforcement part of harm reduction.
Absolutely.
The other part of it is we look at cases where people have unfortunately died, and we try to trace those drugs back to the distributor, back to the drug dealer, and file a case on him. It's called drug distribution resulting in death, kind of akin to a manslaughter charge. It's a 20-year federal prison term if you're convicted, even if it's only one pill.
Right.
So it's a significant charge, but
might make people think.
And Cary, here's the thing: even if it doesn't, I hope it does. I hope it makes people think.
Too.
But even if it doesn't, here's cases that we see every week, every month, and I'm going to talk about this one. And I'm not cherry picking, but this one has been adjudicated, so we can talk about it. We're not going to prejudice a jury or anything like that. Pasadena, California, September 2020, one drug dealer distributed drugs that led to 7 overdoses and 3 deaths in one weekend. So my question to people is, what happens the next weekend if law enforcement doesn't intervene and get that person off the street?
7 more.
That's it.
And 7
more. I mean,
more.
they are not, it's a greed-based crime. It's a greed-based crime, and they're not just going to stop drug dealing unless someone makes them stop. So the harm is going to continue if we allow it to. And, you know, DEA's position is, hey, we're going to go after those people that are causing deaths.
Right.
And that's a big part of our strategy.
And the local police go after the dealers.
Yep.
And you go after the bigwigs.
Yep.
That makes perfect sense. And you all work together.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's seamless.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's seamless.
The other thing is education, Bill.
Yeah. Hey, if I could, you know, a lot of times we try to put the solution, let's call it, into 3 buckets. Criminal justice, treatment, and education and awareness. Right now, I think education and awareness, at least in my eyes, is a super important thing. And that's why we're trying to, you know, we're a law enforcement agency, but we're out doing education and awareness because, as we've talked about today, there's some amount of deception still involved with fentanyl.
That's right.
Our thing is, let's empower people. Let's make sure if they're going to make a decision about drug use that they at least know the drug they're going to take.
Right.
You can't, hey, one thing for sure. We talked about Jaime Puerta, his son Daniel.
By the way, Jaime, I love you.
Yeah, I love you too. His son Daniel made a choice to take half a pill. He did not make a choice to die.
Right.
And that is very different, right? So we have to empower people with knowledge, especially our kids, so they know what's in these drugs that are on the street. And then once they do that, hopefully they make better decisions.
And you, as parents, you better be paying attention to what's going out there.
Yeah.
And having a conversation with your child is not one of those, hey, let me tell you about, oh, Mom, I've heard it. No. You need to make sure that you have that conversation. First of all, we need to have it when they're young.
Yeah, that's right.
We need to hardwire our children. I don't care. Some people ask me always, what age? I don't care if they're 3. Start then.
Yeah.
Tell them about the dangers of drugs. We need to hardwire their brain, especially today more than ever before in our history, that all drugs are bad. Stop talking fentanyl.
Right.
Fentanyl's in everything.
Right.
We know fentanyl's bad. Fentanyl's in meth. Fentanyl's in ecstasy. Fentanyl's in cocaine. How about this message instead of fentanyl kills? All drugs are deadly.
Right.
All drugs are bad. That's what we need to teach our kids when they're young.
Yeah, and I think the messaging has to be consistent. Like when it needs to be that message at home. It needs to be that message, same message in the schools. And when Robbie's doing an after-school program teaching kids how to box, it needs to be that same message given out there, so that there's consistency and there's no confusion about what's going on.
I've offered, I come to Action Rehab, and Carey and I are very close, and I've often said to a lot of the clients in there, if you want to get yourself together and get yourself in some type of shape, come. Nobody comes. Not one.
That's not true.
One came.
That's exactly right. And
One
he's
came,
still
but he
there.
hasn't come. But he hasn't come back.
Oh, he
But
will.
He will. But he did make it. But I come
Well,
every week.
if you do to them what you did to my grandkid,
That's a whole nother
We might
story
need
and another
a
program.
monitor
I'm telling you, man.
Well, maybe
Why
some.
not put you in the middle?
Right.
But here's the thing that I do want to say in all honesty, you know, and I say this always: where there's no responsibility, there's no accountability, equals no consequences.
Our
See?
system is and we don't have time. That's a different show. But
Yeah,
right now,
yeah.
there's no consequences for
Right.
anything.
There's no, and when I was a probation officer years ago, there was drug diversion.
Yeah.
There was a diversion. A guy using drugs or something, wasn't basically a criminal, but he got caught up, went in. He was in there 3, maybe 6 months. Got him to rehab, got him aftercare. Now, nothing. There's nothing hardly.
You know, if you're an adolescent and you get arrested for a misdemeanor, they don't even go to court.
Yeah.
They just throw it out.
Wow.
So when you're growing up with no consequences, you believe that that's what happens
That's-
until the consequence hits
there you
in your
go.
face, and then it's too late. Bill, we got 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill.
What do you?
I
What,
th- hey,
say something to the parents.
That's
out
it.
there.
That's what I was going to say. The main thing is a message to the parents. I used to tell people, Carey, talk to your parents. And then I realized, I used to tell
kids.
parents, talk to your kids. Yeah, that'd be I used to tell parents, talk to your kids. And then after saying that for a while, I realized they didn't know what to talk to them about.
Right.
So you, as parents, it's your responsibility, it's your duty to educate yourselves first about this issue. And if you need help, there's YouTube videos out there. There's guys like Carey. There's guys like Robbie.
You have a website.
And we have a website, dea.gov/1pill. Go to that spot.
Say that again.
dea.gov/1pill. It will give you all the information on especially the fake pills that are out there on the street, what they look like, emoji codes. That's a whole other subject. It's basically a foreign language that our children speak that we don't speak.
Right.
Take that information, sit down and talk with your children, because they do know people using these drugs. That's the reality. Just statistically speaking, they do know people.
Every kid
Yep.
knows people.
Yep.
I don't care who. They
Yep.
know.
Yep. So we need to get parents just a lot more involved than they normally would be.
That 2 to 10 minute thing that we're doing with our children is not going to work anymore, guys. You need to stay hooked into your kids. You need to know where they're at. You need to know who their friends are. If they're sleeping over, you need to talk to the parents. Come on, let's be parents now, not friends.
And have the password to their phone, and don't be afraid to check that phone. You have to check the phone. Be aware of what they're doing on social media.
If you're paying for it, you have the right to look at it.
Special thanks to Bill Bodner with the DEA. Special thanks to the DEA
Yes.
for everything that
Appreciate
you
that.
guys
Yeah.
do to try to help save lives out there
Appreciate
and fight this war that is never ending.
Yep.
Kind of deal. Thanks for coming, Robbie. I appreciate you. To
Appreciate
the
you.
listeners, thank you for being part of our show. Until next week, this is the Action Drug Rehab Hour. Thank you.